Hello, I'm Jennifer Thompson.
And I'm Chad Thompson.
And we are your hosts of The
Premise,
where we get to the story behind the storyteller. And this season 4, that's right, we're in season 4. We've got some amazing storytellers lined up, and we really appreciate you listening. Be sure to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Let's roll.
Autobots, roll out!
Hello, and welcome to The Premise. Hi, Chad.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Hey, good to be here.
I am really...
Not that I ever leave, but...
I know, we don't ever leave. We live here, folks. This is actually our home. We're in this one small room. We never leave. Just here for you. Today, we are speaking with, and I am super excited, Madhushree Gosh. She is an author, a scientist, a cook, and I'm thinking a damn good one, an immigrant, and a daughter of refugees. Her book, Khabaar, An Immigrant Journey of Food, Memory, and Family, was a Ms. Magazine most anticipated read in 2022. Her work has been awarded a notable mention in Best American Essays on Food Writing and a Pushcart nomination. She has been published in the New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, Long Reads, LARB, and others. Madhushree works in oncology diagnostics and is a social justice activist who is focused on gender pay, parity in science, and food stories of immigrants. Madhushree, welcome to The Premise.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. I'm so glad to have you here.
Likewise.
So I've really been looking forward to this conversation. Our listeners might remember that you appeared at our 4th annual San Diego Writers Festival in Coronado this past October.
Which was just such a fantastic experience.
Oh,
I must
thank
tell you. It was
Yeah.
lovely.
I'm so glad you were there. And I bought your book then and read it. And so I've been telling myself I have to have Madhushree on the podcast. And now we're sort of doing a cross promotion with TEDx San Diego because you are going to be speaking at TEDx on June 11th at the Conrad Previs in La Jolla. So this is sort of a thank you for being at the festival. And folks, you have to go listen to Madhushree at the TEDx event.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I talk about what I like to talk about, what I think about, and I think it's pretty universal. What we talk about when we talk about food. That's my TEDx talk, but really it's an extension of my food narrative memoir, Khabaar.
Khabaar, which means food, right?
That means food in Bengali. You learned one Bengali word, so congratulations.
Well, I learned it from you. You know, your writing is poetic and it's palpable. There's this tenderness and this joy, and yet there's also a sadness in your writing. It's a journey that I think everyone should take, a journey into what it means to be human, what it means to belong. It's about family and how food and culture ground us. Why did you write this book?
That's such a introspective way of looking at what I wrote. I personally, when people meet me, they come back and say, well, you've gone through a lot of hell, you've gone through a lot of ups and downs, but for someone who's been through so much, you are mighty jolly. And so I find this very interesting because I think what I write is how we are when we are alone and we are being brutally honest with ourselves and being very introspective of what happened and why and what do we make of it. I think I'm an eternal optimist. I mean, I work in oncology diagnostics. That should tell you more.
I'm not sure. I want to know more about that, but we'll get to it.
Yeah. So you have to really, really look at life, what life throws at us, and especially as writers, rejection is part of our DNA. So you're used to that. But more importantly, as a writer, even your life experiences, you look at it from a writerly perspective. And so when I'm writing my essays, I'm not really thinking this is an essay that's going to be part of this memoir and everybody's going to read it because I'm that awesome. No, the point of writing something like this is there's always an underlying social justice issue because I come from a family of social justice activists. My father was part of the freedom struggle when India got its independence from Britain in 1947. He was a kid and living in what's now Bangladesh, and moved as a refugee back into India. So in our family, from my father's side, we talk about what he did as a child. From my mother's side, it's a family of journalists. So we've always had discussions about politics and how the macro politics gets into the micro, and how does that affect our lives. I think for us in this country, we've been being a superpower for so long has made us as citizens very complacent about what we have. It's only in 2016 that a lot of us took pause to say, hey, I may want to know what your political leanings are.
Yeah.
And then came the intolerance of either side.
Yeah.
And that happens. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg's talked about this, is that, when the pendulum swings, it swings wildly. And so you're observing the churn, because we are all trying to figure out where we land. So this is a long way of saying I write what I feel, and what I feel is important that the world needs to know. And if someone identifies, even if it's one reader who identifies with it, to me, that's my audience.
I really felt like you were telling the world, open your eyes, pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in the authors.
And maybe Americans, maybe I should be more clear about that. Not just the world, but Americans in particular. Like we're in such a bubble that we think, oh, that'll never happen to me. Like you even mentioned that about the pandemic, what's happening in China. And we're like, well, that won't happen here.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting in terms of how classist, racist, and discriminatory we all are. And I'll give you the pandemic as an example. Anti-China sentiments rose. We've had Asian American and Pacific Islander violence that has increased significantly, all coming out of fear, all coming out of the fact that there was a financial downturn for us because of this pandemic. But we had a similar situation right after 9/11 too. So the first victim post 9/11 was a Punjabi Sikh gas station owner in Flagstaff, Arizona. Not Muslim, but a Sikh, not from the Middle East, but from India. The reason why I mention that is, number one, you should not be killing anybody.
Right.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
However,
lesson number one.
Yeah, get your geography right. My God, you people.
Yeah.
Buy
right.
an atlas.
Yeah.
Like literally
Yeah,
buy a globe, like, because you're looking online and you can't even find it. You put it in your Google Maps and say, oh yeah, it's 7,000 miles away. Yeah, but do you know the other countries that surround it? Do you know the political geography of it? So
get your hate right. Come on, folks.
Exactly. Hate, but hate right,
man. You may be
man.
asking a little much.
Way too much. And that's the whole fucking point. Is people who hate are not opening their eyes. They're not open. Oh, it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating.
I think it has to do with education. I'm talking like my mother again, but it has to do with education. I've been here since 93, decades before a lot of the listeners were born.
Right.
But 93 is when I noticed that teachers had to buy supplies for their children, for their students. Folks were more busy trying to figure out, now folks are more busy trying to ban books rather than teach, for example, reproductive rights. I was a nerd. I continue to remain a nerd. So for me, information is an exciting way of living life. You'll die as much as I will. But at the end of the day, did I have a fulfilling life because I learned about a culture I never would have? Yes, I would say so. So if you're going from 93 to 2023, in all these years, the state of education through different states has incrementally fallen. So it's an exponential fall. So you cannot expect millennials or Gen Zers to have the same kind of curiosity we did as a Gen Xer, or if someone's a boomer. That kind of knowledge, that kind of interest in, let's say, science, math, is not there because we have not given them the tools. So why are we complaining? So, if they are hating without context, it's because we taught them that.
Oh, absolutely.
So we have to take that responsibility from our side too, that, we too are responsible for it. Hate is just not one way. It goes both ways.
But I do feel like Gen Zers are opening their eyes more than I think I don't know, sort of reminds me of the 60s, where kids are like, you know what, I'm done with this.
Yeah. So I was just talking to another friend about that. I am enjoying watching millennials and Gen Zers. Millennials get a lot of hate. And the problem is, I don't think folks understand millennials. But the thing is, they are the ones who really told us that you're not working for the company, so you lose your astitva or your existence to that company. Family is important, and this is what I want to do. Seeing the world is important, and I'm not apologizing for it. If I'm done, I will stop.
Yeah.
Gen Zers have taken it to the next level because they also experienced what the millennials have, and now we have given them a world that might end tomorrow. So, I don't think I grew up thinking, the world's ending tomorrow. I just said, okay, we just had maybe a degree or so rise in the 10 years I was a kid, and whereas with this generation, that it's urgent for them. It's immediate. This is a time of survival. Climate change is happening. It has happened, and we haven't paid attention, and we are giving them a world that is shit.
Yeah. And we're not changing it. Like, we're not taking those steps that should have been made, but we're headed down a road that's getting very depressing.
No, because personal changes won't change shit. Like, just recycling isn't going to change anything. Reducing your fuel consumption, it has to happen on a systemic level.
Right.
How the hell did we get here?
How did we get here? I know. It's important. It's really important we talk about it. We can't stick our head in the sand. And I think what I love about your book is that it gets you to think. So you somehow brilliantly managed to write a book about family, about food, about immigration, about nationalism, about all of these things that are really important. And just these little, I was like, wow, she's teaching us little lessons. How did she do that? And yet I read from cover to cover, and never once did I feel like I was being preached at. I never felt like you're really trying to educate me, but you did educate me, and I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I mean that nobody likes to be talked down to. I mean,
yeah,
right? I mean, why would you? And the fact is, I love sharing information. I'm online all the time, way too much that I should be. But I'll go down these rabbit holes, and it is just so much fun to come back and say, guess what I learned? So I have tons and tons of food writer friends who are doing amazing social activism in their countries. So one of them, Ishay Govinder, is a South African food writer. Go get her book if you can. Ishay is her first name. And she's talked about bunny chow. So I reached out.
We want
to
talk
her.
about bunny chow.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So, I didn't know about it much. But the thing is, so she talked about what it was, how it's being perceived now. And, it's a Durban dish, but in Cape Town, it looks different. In Pretoria, it looks different, which is very fascinating. But if you're really looking at it from the social justice perspective, it is a representation of racism.
Yeah.
It's a representation. It's a dish it's a sandwich, hollowed out white bread with lamb curry or vegetable curry that was sold by the banias or the business people.
There's no bunny in bunny chow.
Yeah, there is no bunny in bunny chow. Maybe that's what I should write more about. There's no bunny in bunny chow. And so they would sell it, and they would sell it to the Black South Africans, and wrap it in a newspaper and send them their way. So the establishment was whites only. So that way you're maintaining the status quo. That's why I'm saying, when we come, it's easy to hate a particular group because it's low-hanging fruit and say, oh, white people segregated. But brown people like us also helped in that segregation. So the earlier we acknowledge, the earlier we can start to work towards it. So for me, it's not, let me tell you how awful you are, and I want you to sit in that awfulness because you're so horrible because of your race. My question is, what are we going to do about it? Because life is short. are we making a difference?
Yeah. I do feel like, and maybe this is naive on my part, but I do feel like there's a shift getting ready to happen and people are ready to stop yelling at each other and blaming and start talking. Because that's the thing about, especially in America, politically speaking, we're so busy yelling at each other and blaming each other that we're not really paying attention to what's happening. And we're all affected and we all want the same things, right? Well, we want family and we want to be able to feed our family and be comfortable. And it's getting harder and harder. And yet that division is, I think, a direct result of yelling at each other.
Yeah, I think 2016 to 2023, we are exhausted with hate. It's pretty obvious. We're exhausted with hate. Yeah. A lot of us who are news junkies are actively staying away from the news because it's not productive. It's not productive at all to continue to look at it. But personally, for me, I am very actively involved in local news, not politics, local news, because this is the community that matters. This is the community I'm going to live and die in. So it has to make I have to make a difference as much as my neighbor has to. So during the pandemic, what are you doing? I mean, I didn't know what else to do. I was going batshit crazy. So I was cooking up a storm and I had nobody to feed it. So my neighbors, really benefited from that.
I'm sure they did.
The other thing was, who were the essential workers? The essential workers for me were the farmers and the farm workers who didn't have a day off. They still had to go in and work on the field. So I've literally sought out urban farmers in San Diego. And there's so many of them doing such tremendous amounts of work. And so I would get their produce, make my Indianized version of whatever greens they gave me, and feed them the food because that was my give back. That's all I could do.
Yeah, beautiful.
But I think all of us have done that. All of us have done something or the other where you're looking more towards your neighbors rather than looking at, are you left or are you right? And I hate you because you're either.
Right. I was going to go in the food, but yes, absolutely. In fact, I have a neighbor who we could not be more opposed politically in terms of, but our values are the same. And I love to bring them cookies because food is the way to soften the heart and get us to see each other eye to eye, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's a beautiful thing.
I'll just add to that. Anthony Bourdain's talked about it, that if you place a bowl of food between two people on a table, then you can start a conversation.
Yeah.
I work in cancer diagnostics. Most of our deals are done over dinners. And what does that mean? That you sit across and you're actually saying, I am willing to sit across this. We are using food as an excuse, but we can talk about that food. We can talk about that food in terms of, yes, this reminds me of home, or, oh, it is so shitty, I don't want to eat it. Regardless, it's a conversation that we can have. But if you are not even at the table, what are you negotiating? Right? What is the conversation you're having when you're speaking into the void? And the void is the interwebs. Us, putting out things on Twitter and thinking we are awesome. It really, really tells you how far down the rabbit hole we've gone where we think shouting into the void matters.
Yeah. I wanted to say, well, actually, I would like to request something. I would like you to put all those urban farmers that you found and the research you did. Do you have a list on your website? So
I can,
because I would love to see that list. We live in San Diego, and I would love to support those farmers.
Well, the TEDx talk is about this community farm in City Heights. It's called New Roots Community Farm, run by immigrants, migrants, and refugees. It's 100% community organized initiative. The city did help them get to that level, but in order for them to negotiate this little plot of land where they grow vegetables from their part of the world, whether it's Chad, Senegal, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Congo, including Honduras, Vietnam, and Mexico, it's a paradise. People don't know about it. Whenever I talk about it, everybody's like, seriously? City Heights? I mean, that's a food desert. Yes, it is. And that's the reason why they needed to grow their own food when we resettled them. I mean, San Diego is great as a place that welcomes immigrants and refugees. We have, I mean, the whole Southern California region has welcomed Vietnamese refugees during the war, helped them resettle, and then that, the process of resettling folks has extended to Central African refugees and immigrants, and of course, from the border, the Mexico and other Latin
South
countries.
America,
yeah. So we've been very good at this, but why don't we know about this? And that's my main question: is what do you think about when you think about food that you get from the Hillcrest Farmers Market? If you're buying some greens, do you know where it came from?
Yeah.
You can say, yeah, it came from farmer number, blah, 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 or this farmer is in this stall every time, so I just get his greens. But a lot of these greens actually come from New Roots Community Farm. So I'll put a few of the names and the links out there. I'll talk more about it at my TEDx San Diego talk in June.
Excellent.
But I'd love for you guys to go take a look and say hi to the farmers. They are awesome women.
That would be kind of a cool field trip. Sometimes we're known to go out into the field, go to bookstores.
Let me know. Let me know.
That would be kind of a fun little follow-up.
Yeah.
What made you decide to tell your story on the TEDx stage?
Oh, I got on my political high horse about, San Diego being the finest, America's finest country. And I was like, well, finest city, sorry. And so for me, it was, we talk about fish tacos, we talk about surf, sand, beach, we talk about beers, we talk about pretty much everything except the fact that we are one of the most welcoming cities for immigrants, migrants, and refugees. We are. When you talk about immigrants, migrants, and refugees, we always talk about the border, and either you say the border has to be shut or the border has to be open. How dare you on either side? And again, we are fighting. I'm not interested in that argument, because what I'm interested in is what you're interested in, is to get to know other people. So I wouldn't be living here if I didn't feel welcome.
Are you familiar with the Welcoming San Diego initiative?
No, tell me more.
I believe it was started in 2019. Yeah, it's just, local organizations put together some initiatives on how we can better welcome immigrants and get to know our immigrants, their hardships and their successes. And I actually just learned about it yesterday. So
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this and reaching out and getting to know my neighbors, my immigrant neighbors, as well as the neighbor right next door to me, right? So this is kind of what you're talking about. So
yeah, I mean, the point is also this, and I don't know if folks realize when we do not welcome, or we just move past someone because English is not their first language, just know that these folks have come into a country not knowing that language, but may know more than 3 or 4 languages from where they come from, which we don't.
Right.
Which we don't, right? So
all of my immigrant friends speak more than one language.
Right. And so let's not get on our high horses about, speak English, don't speak XYZ language.
Oh, yeah.
No, so it's a question of tolerance, and sometimes tolerance has to be taught. Kindness has to be taught.
It absolutely does. And I have a really good story I want to share with you and our listeners. When I was very young, my family and I went to New Mexico, to Pueblo Taos. And we ended up spending Christmas Eve with a family there, an Indian family, and they didn't speak English. And we didn't speak their language. And I remember my mom and this woman were in the kitchen talking to each other. And mom was speaking English and this other woman was speaking her native tongue. And they were making tortillas and they were laughing. And there was a lot of hand gestures and they were talking to each other, but they weren't speaking in words per se. And my father and the man of the house were sitting in the living room doing the same thing. And it really struck me. And we spent the entire evening there and had this lovely meal with them, which was very foreign to us because, Christmas dinner was a goose or a turkey. And we had beans and tortillas and, different rice dishes.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah.
No, I think that pretty much, we talk about our pets understanding our language.
Yeah.
And I always go back to my dog and I'll speak to her in Hindi, I'll speak to her in Bengali and English. and she understands everything. So I'm like, hey, look at my dog. My dog can speak 3 languages, you know. But that's not true at all. I think what the animal does is looks at your reaction and reacts accordingly. If they want to. Being temperamental, they may or may not. But I feel most of what we do as humans, our communication goes through our bodies. It's body language rather than the language we use. When I was in graduate school in Stony Brook, I was in a group that had everybody from that group was from mainland China, and I was the only token Indian. And so what they would do is their parents would come and stay with them for months. And most of the time, the parents couldn't speak English. So they would come and they would make these amazing dumplings. And so I've made friends with all the Chinese mothers and grandmothers because, you know, you always gravitate towards food. And so we would sit in the kitchen and she would show me how to, you know, fold the dumplings. Not knowing a lick of English, me not knowing anything of Mandarin. And so, so I totally agree with you. You don't need to have a language if the language is that of communication, and communication can happen in multiple different ways.
Absolutely. Let's talk about this feeling, this sense of home. So first of all, the first 2 chapters and the last chapter of your book gave me this feeling of longing. I found myself crying as I read, but this overwhelming feeling of emotion. Like I felt this feeling of missing something precious, but also enjoying how you were bringing that preciousness into your current life. I guess I felt that for you, but also for me, because we add our own understanding and experiences to anything we read, right? And I've been in San Diego for 34 years. This is definitely home. Chad and I own our home. And yet I still call the Pacific Northwest, where I grew up, home. And when I visit there, I tell people I'm going home. And sometimes I marvel at these words as they leave my mouth. Like, why do I call it home? But yet we cling to our roots with this fierceness. And you talk a lot about that in your book with Baba and what, you know, Desh is what is now known as Bangladesh, and to you, Desh is India. Talk more about this.
Yeah. No, you pretty much said it. You know, when people talk about the story of, you know, what does home mean to you, you're always talking about where you felt comfortable, where you felt you could be you and celebrate yourself.
Do you think it's also about where you felt loved?
Yeah. Well, not necessarily though.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to write about my childhood, which I think was very happy, very uneventful in terms of trauma. But if you went and asked my sister the same question, she'll go on a rant about how awful some stupid shit happened, you know, which we had the same childhood. We had the same childhood. So I don't know if that would be the case, but yeah, it would be about love. It would be about belonging. You felt you belonged, meaning you were part of that tribe, right? If it's a tribe of 5 little girls hanging out and, you know, racing down the street on skateboards or whatever they do, that's where they belonged. So, and what I always say is when we talk about immigrants, we are also talking about people who may not be immigrants, who may have been living in that country for generations, but have moved from one city to the next. And that too is a journey that we don't talk about. Because you come into San Diego, is a beautiful place. Why would you not love it? But you will always go back home, this happened. Because that's where your roots are. Now, if you look at it from the belonging perspective, your initial memories in your brain are formed in your childhood. That is what is hardwired into you. The way you react, the way you act, the way you express joy, sorrow is all defined by how you were brought up. You know, nurture versus nature. How you were brought up. Of course, your nature will come out, but what was your family's reaction? Like I said, in my book, we were not a demonstrative family, but the demonstration was through food. Like you had to eat and you had to feed your family to show how much you love them, and we had to eat to show how much we appreciated that. But I am a very affectionate person. People get mad at me because I'm a hugger. So for during the pandemic, it was fucking hell. Yeah. It was hell. Like my dog was like, get away from me.
You said, I think you hadn't hugged anyone for, I think it was 214 days. Is that right?
No, 214 days was my ex-husband. That was 200. Yeah. This was 68 weeks.
Okay.
Almost 68 over a year.
One person's hell is another person's heaven.
That's true. Yeah, I have friends who are so happy they don't have to hug me anymore. That was going to be one of my questions for you, Madhushree. Is like, you did such a good job of describing the love language in your family, and like you would get home and there was this one scene where you were coming home and something was happening. I think there were riots happening during, I forget what year it was, 80.
Yeah. 84.
And 80, I was going to say 84. And your mom, it was the look on her face that showed she was so relieved that you were home, but she didn't show love with hugging. You weren't a hugging family. And to me, that I was like, wow. And then I was going to ask you, are you a hugger now? And do you think that's a result of?
So that's why I'm saying, when you're talking about, how, what you consider home, how do you interact and what you do, you may not have been taught hugging, but if that's in your nature, it's going to come out. Yeah. It's going to come out. So my friends who are my family, we've termed that family now. They know if they come home, they know that they will be sent back with leftovers that'll feed them for 3 or 4 days. They know they will be hugged so much that, we have to listen to each other's hearts. Do you know the scientific, well, I think it's scientific, principle behind hugging? It's so when you're hugging, your heart is touching the other person's heart, and your heart has a heartbeat and it vibrates at a certain frequency. Right? Okay. So when I'm hugging you, I am actually telling you how much I want to be connected to you. So how do you connect? The frequency of heartbeats actually start matching.
Wow.
There was an NPR KPBS program on that. We should go dig that up.
We should. Chad's like, I don't know if I believe this. I can see the look on his face.
Well, no, I think this is because I do have some experience with the tuning of instruments, and the Western standard being A440, right, is the frequency at which everything is tuned to. Yeah. So there's like a subset of wingnuts online that want to change the Western tuning standard to like A432.
Okay.
And then because that's the frequency that the human heart resonates at.
Is that right?
So there's like a whole thing behind that I think.
We should check this out, because I think it'll be a great science experiment. Yeah. So I'm like, I keep hugging. I don't mind. I'm
not saying don't hug.
You just called me a wingnut, sir. You just called me a wingnut.
No, I'm saying the people who are arguing.
Totally did.
The people who are arguing for the tuning, the taking centuries of musical theory and chucking it in the bin by changing everything to like 432.
We did chuck slavery in the bin.
That's true. There are things worth being chucked in the bin. I don't know if music
theory is not one of them.
But it can still adapt, because that's what we do as humans, is we adapt.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about electronic instruments, right? Is you can just hit a button a couple times and boom, you're in 432, you're in 431, you're in whatever. It's easy enough. But tuning a saxophone is non-starter.
It makes me think of polyrhythms too.
Yes. So we could be vibrating at a different level, but if we are hugging, we are actually exchanging that. So that's when you resonate. It's a question of resonance. So that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. And my middle name is Wingnut.
Oh, jeez.
No.
Oh, I won't let him forget that.
You don't want to actually change the resonance of the music. But you're right. Like when you touch someone, you exchange energy. I mean, what was it? Neil deGrasse Tyson did that experiment where when you shake someone else's hand, one of you is taking your DNA on and transmitting it onto the other person. But it's interesting. It goes from one to the other, not necessarily both. But, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, it all might depend on what the energy is. One is an energy suck, the other one's not.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So. Yeah. Well, okay. This is awesome. here's one thing I'd like to say, though. I want to talk about food because there's so many beautiful descriptions of food and the way you describe spices and cooking, even just the cooking process and how you even put like black sesame seeds on your gluten-free naan. And I appreciated the recipes. And in fact, I very much encourage you to write a cookbook. I'm in. I'm all in on a complete, or a blog. You might already have that.
No, it's all there on my IG and TikTok. That's all I do is cook and put it out there.
It's wonderful. Well, and Chad and I love, that is our love language. You know, we love to cook for people and entertain people. And so when can we have you for dinner? I want to cook for you.
You tell me when. I'll be there. I can start walking right now.
Awesome. Well, hey, we'll even pick you up. You don't have to walk. Although it's probably not that far. When we were in Italy, we went to Venice in the fall. And you know where we wanted to eat the whole time we were there? Just take a guess.
Tell me.
Indian food. There, we found this amazing Indian food restaurant. People are like, "You're in Venice eating Indian food?" And we're all, "Fuck yeah!" It was so good.
Was it Indian? No.
What?
Hold up. What? Was it Bangladeshi or Indian?
You know, I wanted to check on that because I don't know, but it was.
There's a huge influx of Bangladeshi workers who go there to Italy, and there's a huge population, and they're thriving. Of course, they're thriving there. But a lot of so the West cannot distinguish between Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh in our foods, and therefore the mishmash of that food is what is represented as Indian food, whereas they're clearly distinct, all having their wonderful qualities. For example, Pakistan, what was the name of that? Rabia just wrote this book. I will remember this book right now, but give me 1 second on that. But this book is about love language being food and how you eat a lot because that's what your parents feed you. You're feeding you love, and so you become fat. So is fat equals to love or not? For Bangladeshi food, Chitrita Banerjee is a memoirist and a food anthropologist who's written a lot about, you know, the food that's in Bangladesh and the food that has traveled to India and the subtle differences in Bengali food. So I would encourage you to find out if this is a Bangladeshi restaurant looking at representing Indian food.
Well, I will say the reviews say that it's called Ital India. Ooh, and the reviews say it's the best halal food. I'm going to find out. I want to know more about, you know, I understand that Southern Indian food is mainly vegetarian.
I'm sorry I had to interrupt you. The name of Rabia Chaudhry's book is Fatty Fatty Boom Boom, and she's an amazing person.
Fatty Fatty Boom Boom? That's the best title ever.
I know. She's an amazing writer, fantastic defender of justice. She's a lawyer, and she's the lawyer who got Adnan Saeed freed. So go get her book.
I will definitely go get her book. Thank you. Yeah, we love Indian food. I mean, we love Indian food. And of course, what we know as Westerners, you know, and we're very fascinated in the idea of, you know, how colonialism has affected Indian food, especially for us Westerners. Like tikka masala was really, as far as I know.
Well, it depends on the origin story you believe, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you tell us, Madhushree.
So chicken tikka masala is not an Indian concoction. It is based on my research, it started out somewhere on a dark and stormy night in Scotland, where a truck driver.
Because there are no other nights like.
No, exactly. Of course not. And it's Scotland. Every night is dark and stormy. Exactly. So the Scots are going to come attack me after this. But anyway, so this trucker came in to this restaurant and asked for something spicy that you know. They could eat because it was cold. And so the chef there went and zhuzhed up some food, which was, you know, leftover tandoori chicken that they then put in a sauce. Likely, and I've read a lot about this, likely this happened in a restaurant run by Bangladeshi chefs and cooks. And so really us Indians, we are good at claiming everything is ours. I mean, we claim Kamala Harris was ours. So like, oh my God, look at her. She's an aunt. No, she's not.
No, she's not.
Are you gatekeeping?
It's like, she didn't identify with that. She just did when she wanted the votes. But okay, that's a separate discussion.
Totally, I want to get into that one with you too. Go on.
So chicken tikka masala started that way. Then the line started forming, and so then it became something that's almost a British dish now, right? It's like a national dish.
Yeah.
The other story that there is Dilli Darbar, which is one of the older Mughlai foods. So times when the Mughals came in and the Islam came in, right around that time, that they made this dish in this restaurant called Dilli Darbar, which is a landmark restaurant. You can believe either or, it doesn't really matter. Likely it happened in a Bangladeshi kitchen in Scotland, is my theory.
Interesting.
Does that make it awful? No, it's a wonderful dish.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, there's a lot of foods that came directly out of, slavery, colonialism in so many different, parts of the world where people had to, like you were talking about the bunny chow, people weren't allowed to go into restaurants, but they had to eat. So they're given food that they can take on the go and they don't need silverware. And it's like, now we have this amazing food that is a direct result of racism, right?
And also if you're really looking at it, when we talk about Indian food and Indian food is so spicy, I want folks to also understand, take a step back. Chilies didn't used to grow in India. We had other things by which we spiced up our food, but we didn't really spice it up as much as we did once the colonizers, so this is the Portuguese, brought in chilies. Mexican, Latino food, adding in cumin came in from our spice racks, right?
Yeah.
More importantly, and this is what I've talked about in the book, because I went down the masala chai rabbit hole, which is the reason why I put it on the cover too, is tea is not Indian. So if it isn't Indian, what the heck is it? And it's actually a direct result of, our colonizers, which is, it was in China, and then because of the Opium Wars, because of the political situation, the British Raj then said, okay, what the heck do we do? Let's grow it in one of our colonies that has similar weather like China, and it ended up being near Darjeeling and Assam, and so those tea estates still exist.
I loved that section learning about tea because I'm a huge tea drinker. I don't drink coffee. I know you drink coffee and you drink it how I used to. No sugar, cream, cut the acid. But I'm a huge tea drinker. And I want to talk about your cover though. So for our listeners, read this book, learning about how tea has been a huge... just read the book, but colonization and like controlling other humans, right? And like tea had such a huge part of that all over the world. But the cover is beautiful. And I know that you took this photograph, or am I right about that?
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. You're a photographer because there's several photos and I believe you took all of them.
Yes, I did, except for my parents because I wasn't born then.
Well, that's a good point. Which, by the way, they're so adorable. I was like, oh my God, I love them so much.
I literally, I'm so weird. When people come back and say, oh, I love the cover, I move the picture to my parents' picture. I'm saying, go say hi to them. Just say hi to my parents.
I did it a couple times. Once I discovered that the photograph was there during the reading of the book, every once in a while I would just flip to the back and look at their faces because your dad has such a kindness and a softness and this, like, I want to say that he was a rascal.
Oh, he was. His name was Hashi. I'm teaching you another Bengali word. Hashi means laughter. So my dad, we knew, he would come into the room and you could see the twinkle in his eye and you knew some stupid dad joke was coming out of his mouth right now,
Awesome.
Dad jokes are universal.
Yeah,
I know. And so people ask about, why I keep talking about them, because I feel I chose not to have children. Because I feel there are many different ways the information that I have can be passed down to other generations, and genetic information passed down is not what I'm interested in. However, I also want everybody to know about my parents because they were very cool people.
And your mom is just like, she just looks so blissful and peaceful. Is this their wedding photo?
No, this was, I think, 4 months after that or
Okay.
something. And they had to go take, because we used to make fun of them. There aren't any wedding pictures. We're like, are you really married? And so they'd pull this out. They'd pull this out and say, look, we went to a studio and got this picture taken. I'm like, you look sad. Like,
Now they don't look
miserable.
sad to me.
No, we used to make fun of them, of course.
Oh,
we'd say
right.
stuff like that.
It's beautiful, but I'm going to take you back to the cover. I'm not going to let you completely.
Okay. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah. Tell us about it.
So, when I was writing this book, a lot of the essays were written, some of them were published, and a lot of them used my photographs. But when University of Iowa Press came in, everybody scared me silly, saying, they will, force you to use a particular cover. They'll do this as your first book. Don't argue with them. And then there'll be somebody else saying it's your first book. You should argue with them. So it was getting a little crazy. Whereas University of Iowa Press is one of the best groups that I've ever worked with. And I work with other people all the time. But this was just such a professional group who understood that I wanted to write it in the language I did, in a braided narrative essay form where I'm putting in my life with other chefs and cooks and writers. And they championed it. They supported what I'm doing. When I showed these pictures, of course, I sent them 30 pictures, of which we had to narrow it down to 9 or 10. And but the negotiation there was very straightforward. They liked it. They took it. I met them because all this happened during the pandemic, so I wasn't really meeting them in person. So I was a featured speaker at the University of Iowa in October. So I went and met my editors and my book cover designer for the first time. This is after the book had been out for months. And so I was talking to the designer. I said, what made you choose this? She said, you have an eye for composition. I didn't have to change anything. Why wouldn't I use a picture that's already fine enough? I mean, what I really liked that they did was putting the mandala images on it, because it really ties into what I'm trying to say, which is in a narrative braided memoir section, you're always touching stone. You're always coming back to what is it that matters to you. When you're really talking about food, what are you really talking about? Are you talking about a recipe, or are you talking about the history behind it? Are you talking about how you're feeling about that food, or did you learn something new and you want to employ that? So, yeah, that's my story of the cover.
Well, it definitely draws me in. Initially, I loved the cover even before I knew anything about it. It's like this deep red, beautiful. Is that a sari or?
So the sari fabric is actually from this very cool Indian group run by two sisters who are just awesome to watch online. The name of the company is Suta, SUTA.in. So that's their website. And what they've done is, and they were corporate kids, and then they said, no, fuck it, we don't want to do that. We want to get back to our roots. And in India, they actually work with the weavers, with the textile people and the print people, and come up with these saris that are very affordable, but it really takes all the proceeds and works towards keeping this industry going, the textile industry for saris going. And I love that. This is what I mean by the next generation. They're doing such cool things. Like, I'm the desi auntie who's like clinging on to this. So I wanted to put that in. I did get a question when I was at my talk at Center for Fiction in April of last year. A writer friend of mine asked this question, which is very pertinent. And she said, you keep saying you don't want to talk about the conventional ways that people perceive Indians as, or South Asians as. Then why would you put the image of a cup and, a fabric next to it? And that's a great question, because aesthetically it looks beautiful, right? Yeah. Aesthetically it looks lovely. But everything that I do, I've realized I do is very subversive, because what I wanted to do is, when you look at this, you feel calm, you feel like, oh, this is a lovely book about food. And then you open it and bam, social justice hits you in the face. That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. So while I wasn't planning it, apparently I was, at least my subconscious was.
You say in the acknowledgments that this book was a decade in the making, and yet I know from the reading that you wrote a lot of this during the pandemic. Was this the book you intended to write initially, or do you think that it was shaped by the solitude you experienced during the pandemic?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the book proposal that went to Nina Mukherjee, first now the food story editor of University of Iowa Press, was very different from what this book turned out to be. Because by the time they said yes, I said yes. We started, collating how this shaping this book. The pandemic happened, and so it just didn't make sense to keep writing the way I was, because in that case, it was in the beginning, it was a narrative, food narrative memoir, really talking about um, uh, chefs and cooks who are not as celebrated, right? We celebrate pomp, we celebrate TV, we celebrate the celebrity chefs, and I wanted to talk about people that we don't talk about, and this is what I wanted to write about. But then the pandemic happened. So about 30%, 35% of the book was actually scrapped, and I rewrote it because it really, the pandemic, as you said, it gave me pause enough to say, what am I doing with my life? And does this even matter? I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't read the book, then nothing matters. But if you read the book, if you read the book, then yes, then you find some things to identify with. You find some things you learned, and you may find some things that are wrong that you may want to correct. And you can always reach me and yell at me for my wrong research. But given that copy editors and content editors at Iowa have gone through so carefully, I highly doubt you'll find that. But bottom line is that's the way I felt. I had to put the story out there because the end of the chapter 10, the last chapter, was pretty much us waiting because we hadn't gotten out of the pandemic. I mean, I still don't think we've gotten out of the pandemic, but that's my personal opinion.
I'm with you. Yeah.
And the fact that we wander around without masks is just, it's horrifying.
Confounding.
It's horrifying to me. It just is. But then am I wandering around without masks because I have had 5 shots? Yeah, of course I am. And that's where you try to, justify what you're doing, but we're all doing it. And so the last chapter basically says, and we wait. I think that's what it says.
It is, yeah. And we wait.
But till then, I wait.
I was going to say, I thought it was I wait, but
yeah, I wait.
You talk a lot about rituals and habits in this book. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us more about the importance of rituals and changing habits and how they affect how we see our lives and our joy?
Yeah. So I will say every creative person is ritualistic. Every science person is ritualistic. Every sports watching fan is ritualistic. You hear that a lot. Oh, I wore my favorite sweatshirt because so-and-so was playing against so-and-so. You hear, I was reading this on Twitter about game rituals where the dad had to sit on the floor because he was sitting on the floor when the Boston Sox did something, whatever. I'm not that great in sports, as you can see. But for science folks, I don't, have you been in a research lab or a science lab, like a university lab? Have you seen the lab?
I've seen them on television. Does that count?
All right. No, it doesn't, because television makes it glamorous. The way we used to. So you're really pushed against different around a table-ish space where you pipette, you work, you count colonies on cells or whatever else you do, right? And so every week you put in a bench paper so any spills don't go into the table, even though the table shouldn't absorb anything. But so these are all safety precautions that you do. So you put that and then you throw it away and again put another one, just so you're not contaminating the space. It's very important that you don't contaminate your experiments, right? And so for that you have to use tape to tape it, but it shouldn't be taped so tight that you can't take the paper out. And this is a long way of saying, when I was in lab at Hopkins, I was a postdoc there, and the graduate students would stand around me watching me put my paper on top because I had to have 3 strips on one side, 2 strips on the other, and 1 each on each side. And if it wasn't straight, I would have to start over again. And so is it ritualistic? Is it habit? Is it superstition? It's a combination of all of that. Yeah, is it OCD? What is it? So even in science, you would try to do that because, my experiment worked. I'm going to try it again because it's going to work again.
It seems important in science, though. I get that. Like, if you have a ritual in that way, then you're not going to make a mistake. You have to do it
so that is basic. Yeah, that's called, if you're moving into product development, it's called reproducibility or operator reproducibility, meaning if I ran the experiment or you ran the experiment, it should be the same. But we can go down the product development workflow some other time. But that's science, So we all have our own rituals about, what works and what doesn't work. Now, the biggest theory that has been debunked over and over again, but it's wonderful to say it, is the science of habit. And it is that in 21 days, you can change the habit. And what that means is in about 3 weeks, you can stop eating a cookie at 3 p.m. if you get up and go stand next to your coworker or go rub your dog's head, right? So every time at 3 o'clock, if you want to eat a cookie, don't eat the cookie, drink a glass of water, go pet your dog.
Do a different habit. Yeah. A different ritual.
And so you're replacing one for the other.
Not happening. The cookie is the only damn thing I have in my life.
No, exactly. Come on now.
Exactly. But the thing is, but if that theory were true, which a lot of us think it's true, right? Then we should not have been able to get into the lockdown as fast as we did.
Right.
Now, was the universe helping us, as in pretty much shutting down everything? Yes. Fear helped us form this habit really quickly.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by rituals. I'm fascinated by what we call OCD, which is not really OCD, because I think we are disrespecting people who are suffering from that.
That's true.
When we say that. I think these are just habits that we lean on as crutches, because if you haven't realized yet, nothing in our life is in control.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have anything in our control. And the pandemic was a great example of how much we weren't in control.
And I think that people don't give themselves enough credit. I mean, humans are adaptable. I mean, that's how we survive.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be things thrown at us that we don't expect and we can't control, as you point out in your book. Whether we're forced to leave our country or live under a dictator or shut down and hide away due to a pandemic, we find joy and hope and in small gardens, in poetry, and memories. Yeah.
You said it so much better. Yes, absolutely.
Well, 3 o'clock cookies.
And 3 o'clock cookies, because Chad actually does that. That was very astute of you. We quit drinking this year. Chad and I gave up alcohol. I know. Yeah. I'm really going to miss the whiskey. We love it. We committed for 1 year, to do something different and pay attention to our bodies and pay attention to what's happening. Because I do think that there's a shift for me in business, in life, in conversations. And I want to be uber aware of what people are doing and saying and what I'm supposed to be doing to help, right? To help move things forward in a positive way. Sure. And so giving up alcohol, but Chad is not going to give up cookies.
Yeah, well, I mean, I gave up alcohol. Well, I never drank till I came to this country. Then this country corrupted me. And so
we're good at that.
So I started, I started when I was 22, 23. And then I got married, and then I started getting allergic reactions, so hives. And I, for the life of me, didn't know what it was. Likely it was my ex, but I didn't realize that. But
I bet it was.
So I didn't know what it was. I gave up coffee and I gave up alcohol. And to tell you the truth, I did not miss alcohol. I missed coffee like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 10 years later, when I filed for divorce, I'm like, fuck it. I'm drinking again. I'm drinking everything.
Where's the whiskey?
I know. And then and then I, for my writing workshop that I really love, in Italy, they were like, you're coming to Italy and you're drinking Darjeeling tea. Like, what the heck is wrong with you? So that's when I started coffee again, and nothing happened. So which meant, by elimination of, in this case, my ex, I was fine.
It really was the ex. And if you read the book, you'll know why. I want to talk about we're running out of time, and I have so many things I wanted to ask you. And of course, we just don't have the time, but maybe we'll have you back again.
Yeah.
In the very beginning of your book, in the author's note, you did something that made me yell out loud, yes! This idea that foreign words must be italicized. And you explain, well, those words aren't foreign to me. Why should I italicize something that's not foreign to me? Can you talk more about that?
I actually would like for all of us, especially your listeners, to try to question themselves when they say something is foreign. Because that has a connotation that I don't think we have been very introspective about. So I've always used different languages in my writing. I've never italicized them. And because if you really think about it, and any listener who's from India can vouch for this, in schools and colleges, we speak a mixture of multiple languages. And so, we even call it Hinglish, where you have, words of Hindi.
Like Spanglish,
yeah, mishmashed into English. And even the English isms are either very British or very Indian, because that's where we come from. So we've always done this. So for me, this wasn't foreign. By foreign, my opinion is, by foreign, we mean, okay, I'm not familiar with this, so it cannot be part of my repertoire. I've also got comments like, well, it's not part of the Oxford Dictionary, therefore. I say fuck dictionaries. I also say fuck writing programs where they say show, don't tell. Viet Thanh Nguyen has talked about this, that we are writing in our colonizers' languages, but we have lived experiences of folklore, myth, as well as comic books, where you're talking about a story within a story. You're talking about showing and telling. And sometimes you're telling and not showing. Sometimes you're showing, not telling. We break all these rules. So the writing workshop construct has been a very white Iowa workshop concept. So how does my story fit into that? It does not. It does not. So you have to ask yourself, when you say something is foreign, what do you mean by that? And my question here was, when I do put this in, can I put it in such that a person who's never heard this word will be able to follow this? Or is this person going to stop and say, oops, no, I can't do it because I don't even know what they're saying? And I don't think that happened. I think everybody was able to, and this is not just one language that I use. I think I've used 3 or 4 languages in this book besides English. So that's how we speak. That's how we stick to it. I was at the Jaipur Lit Festival in January. We had this question. This is my first Indian audience, and we were talking about this, and you could see folks cheering because it's finally somebody, he's like, oh yes, you said it. This is exactly what we feel, because that's such a true feeling. And sometimes it's nice to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love the fact that you published it in University of Iowa Press.
Totally.
I know. Yeah. I know. They
Brilliant.
love it. But they are so sweet. They love it though.
That makes me happy. There's hope.
For sure.
I can remember being in college. I'm a writer, and I minored in English, and being told I couldn't use big words or concepts because people wouldn't understand them. And I thought to myself, that is ridiculous. Like, seriously, if you don't know a word, you look it up. You don't just quit reading because you can't. So the point is so good. It's so right on.
But I would put a caveat to this. Some folks feel like they need to italicize it. And I feel like it's a personal choice. Some people feel like that's the only way the gravitas will be, or like if it's a whole sentence.
Or does it make it special? Right.
Yeah, but it is what it is. I had promised myself I won't write about, turmeric and jasmine and cumin, and I wrote about all of that. So,
Wait, why didn't you want to write about them?
Because when I came to this country, there was this exoticization of South Asian foods and South Asian lives, that the woman was gorgeous but very troubled with long hair and huge eyes waiting for her knight in shining armor, and there was this white guy who rescued her. And those were the stories that I was being exposed to when I came in. I was reading South Asian literature primarily to quell my homesickness. And so I'm like, but this is not the story I want to hear. Then came, writing from Arundhati Roy, which just pretty much blew every rule away. Then came Jhumpa Lahiri, who wrote very poetic and lyrical, but it was very specific about a particular community that moved to the US. So there were many different ways of writing this, but I was done looking at covers that showed, a very graceful dancing pose of a woman for no reason, because that's not how we operate.
Yeah. Have you always wanted to be a writer? Was that something? Because, I mean, you became a scientist, but you're also this incredibly creative writer.
So I wrote my first really awful poem when I was 8 and got published. And it was
Wait,
horrible.
It was published when you were 8?
Yeah, because there was a children's section in what was the newspaper? The Pioneer in Lucknow, India. And my mother bought 10 copies of it, and she pretty much mailed it to all her people. And I'm like, oh, look at that. This is so amazing. I'm so awesome. And so
moms.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Beautiful.
You'd have loved her. She was so cool. So
I do love her. You brought her to life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was writing, but then, it's a question of when you're in a developing country, the only way the next generation can do better is if they leave for America, right? And if you're good in science, you don't do anything else. That is your aim. That's your goal. So when I came to the US for my PhD, I stopped writing because I needed to focus to get my PhD and get the hell out.
Yeah.
I started writing fiction. I mean, a lot of people say, this is the writing is so descriptive. It's because of my training in fiction. I came here, then I trained a lot with a lot of different writers. Dani Shapiro is one of my mentors. She's blurbed this book, for which I'm really grateful for. But what she has said is how I lead my life, but I also write in that sense of, you have to notice what you notice, right?
I want to read her endorsement for you. Can I read that real quick?
Go ahead.
Khabaar crackles with energy and passion. This book engages the reader on many levels. It awakens the senses, heightens awareness of racial and gender disparity, and perhaps above all is a powerful love story between its author and her family and country of origin. Ghosh has written a book that educates as it entertains, which is no easy feat. I am enriched for having read it. Dani Shapiro.
Isn't she awesome?
That is such a wonderful endorsement. And when I read that, I was like, oh, yeah, it gave me tingles. I was like, absolutely.
She's awesome.
So you started writing fiction. And at what point did you know you would write your story?
Yeah, so I was writing fiction because I was too scared to write nonfiction. I was writing fiction because my paycheck job was stressful. So I didn't want to talk about my life. I wanted to talk about things that I could imagine. But then I realized I was writing my own story over and over again and fictionalizing
it. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And as a writer, you've done it too. So
we all do it. Yeah.
You start out and say, oh, no, it's fiction. Fuck that. It's not. But then what happened was my parents passed away, and then my marriage fell apart. And I was in the middle of writing this very complicated novel, and I just couldn't write. My brain just was fried. I couldn't write. I didn't know what was happening. So the only way I could make sense was to write about it. So I was literally writing about the 214 days of silence in real time. I was writing in real time. So as it was happening. Wow. Now, what came off that was 700 pages of, oh my God, maudlin, sad, woe is me, look at me, my now ex has become my now ex, and how sad am I? Nobody wants that. I'm sorry.
But you have to write it. You have to write it for you.
So then you write it, and that I started that in Sirenland, in Positano, in Italy. That's why it's very special to me, because Dani and all the teachers there, Hannah Tinty, Mike Maron, whose movie just came out. These are the ones who helped me get my nonfiction going.
Those are some big names, yeah.
And so they helped it going, and of course Jim Shepard, who's the greatest teacher in my opinion. So they helped me write the nonfiction work. But what was happening, which was very surprising to me, is it started getting attention. So there were lots of literary magazines, newspapers, op-ed pieces that the editors were very interested in what I had to say. Like, you're, doing your own thing in a little hole. You never think that somebody's going to come and want your work, and in fact want your work and pay for it. So
bonus.
I know. So that's what happened. So that's when people were like, well, you're a nonfiction writer. You just have been pretending to be a fiction writer. So that's how I moved into memoir. But I've always been very cautious about writing memoir that's so maudlin or so depressing that the reader does not get a single moment to breathe. And every writing piece is also like a musical piece. It's also like, when you write poetry, which is you have breaks. You need the reader to pause.
Yeah.
You need the reader to reflect. If you keep giving them data after data point, that doesn't help. If you keep telling them, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, that means you're just inundating them with emotions that they may not have even realized they had.
Sure.
So
yeah.
It's a dance. It's a dance. And so I feel that the essay form has been very kind to me, but I love the braided essay form. It lets me talk about multiple things, including data as a science person, memoir as a creative writer, as well as connecting with the reader, because the reader needs to understand why this is related.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was done reading, I thought, it's a combination of analytical writing and introspection weaved in such a way that we take this journey with you. Yeah. And we're there, but yet we learn so much in a very beautiful way. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today, Madhushree. We really appreciate you coming and spending the time to share your story with us.
This is just fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity. I just so loved hanging out with you too.
And we're serious. We're going to invite you to dinner.
All right, then.
And make waiting. You Indian food.
What?
Yes.
That's bold.
I'm doing it.
That is bold.
I want to know if it's good. That is bold.
Hope you like tikka masala.
Wow.
Hey.
I know, right? Wow. All right. It's like people coming to my house and bringing me, here, I found a book on India for you. I'm like, oh, really? Oh, thanks.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Thank you.
I won't do that. No, mostly because I want to know if what we can do to make it better.
Yes. You know what I've done during my book tour, which has been just amazing with all the friends supporting me. I've gone to my friends' homes in all parts of the country, and I've cooked in their kitchens. So let's cook together.
We have a nice, very cook-worthy kitchen space.
Fantastic.
Not fancy, but all the utensils. We love to cook.
That's all we need.
All the spices you could want in large quantities.
We have cupboards full of spices. It's ridiculous.
That's awesome. This is music to my ears.
If you need 4 cups of cumin, we've got you covered.
Yeah, we really do, actually. He's not kidding. It's ridiculous. And then the Korean, what's that Korean?
Bibimbap.
No, well, we made that the other day. Chad made it, I should say. Give him all the credit. But no, I buy the Korean red chili pepper.
The powder for the
powder.
Oh, that is so good.
For the kimchi.
By the pound. Yeah, because we love kimchi.
Okay. So if you want something spicy as a powder that you can tone down with other things, I will send you a link to Kolhapuri Thecha, it's basically garlic and chilies. And it is the spiciest and it's the bestest.
And Chad is very interested in your garlic ginger paste. I read about that.
I was like, garlic ginger paste? I don't have to mince my own garlic.
He's like, I want
ginger?
that. Yeah. Keep it in the fridge.
Yeah,
what?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. You do that.
Well, listeners, you can follow Madhushree at writemadhushree.com. Follow her on Instagram and LinkedIn at writemadhushree. This has been another episode of The Premise. Please follow The Premise on Twitter at PodPremise and be sure to subscribe. We're available everywhere you get podcasts, and it really helps our numbers. It helps us get more awareness of the podcast and the festival, and we really appreciate your support. You can visit us online at thepremisepod.com and san diego writers festival.com. And be sure to rate us wherever you get your podcasts. Until next week, thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Say goodbye, Madhushree.
Oh, goodbye. Oh, I thought I had to shut up.
No, you can say goodbye.
Bye.